What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The eighth generation of Chevrolet Malibu is difficult to call successful. The model, bearing a name with a rich history, finally abandoned the American identity. The car, developed in conjunction with the Korean division of GM, became a single for markets around the world, and the first to receive it was Korea, not the United States. Having acquired a new platform GM Epsilon II, it kept the puffy and inexpressive face from the predecessor of the seventh generation. And it did not combine radically with interesting design of the rear part, which obviously flirted with the stylistics of Camaro muscle car. In general, it is not surprising that the sedan, which debuted in late 2011 and hit the markets in 2012, immediately began to prepare for an early restyling. The restyling did take place in 2013, less than a year after the debut, but for Russia all this fuss was no longer relevant. The Malibu was brought to us in 2012, but sales were so low that the update made no sense. The sales plan in Russia was already modest, from 600 cars per year, but in practice, 600 cars were sold only by the end of 2014. Then the experiment was decided to end. Prices did not dispose to great success and prices. At the start for Malibu in the only configuration asked 1.3 million rubles, to which you could add an extra charge for a few options like a sunroof. At the same time, the same Mondeo or Tina in the base cost 1 million rubles, and Camry was even cheaper. Of course, the cars differed in equipment and engines, but buyers still did not understand why they were offered to pay so much for a car manufactured in South Korea and assembled out of Toyota in Kaliningrad. However, today the prices for these cars are already well within the market. A good Camry is asked for 1.5 million, and Malibu can be bought for 1 million. However, the choice is 3 orders of magnitude more modest. At the time of writing, there were only 8 cars for sale on Avito. Are there any chances for success with such a meager assortment? The age of 8 to 10 years allows to hope for decent safety of the body. Adherents of real foreign quality should take into account that the cars were assembled out of Toyota by the method of large unit assembly, and welded and painted bodies came to Kaliningrad from Korea. In fact, it does not give any incredible advantages, but it is difficult to find complaints about the quality of coloring, and their statistics is a bit small taking into account the scarce circulation of cars. Accordingly, attention should be paid primarily to the accident history of a particular car, as well as typical operational defects. The massive front bumper covers the whole frontal part, protecting the edge of the hood, but it collects stones and chips. The hood here is aluminum and should not rust, so it is worth to pay attention to it. A steel hood hints at restoration after an accident. Arches and sills are not covered with anything, so they suffer from stones and sandblasts. It is worth to look into the cavities of the arches, as well as inspect the sills from below, in the seam zone. From behind, potentially weak places are minimum. Even a platform of a license plate is brought out on a bumper and does not upset. With corrosion, so it is necessary to examine only the bottom edge of a cover of a trunk and a condition of a niche of a spare wheel. Well, on cars with a sunroof you should check its work and dryness of the floor in the cabin. In the case of Malibu, the chances of meeting a badly beaten and restored car are very low simply due to the fact that body parts for it are rare and expensive. Short conveyor life and low popularity led to the fact that manufacturers of non-original body parts model practically ignored, and the original is expensive and is almost always brought to order. For example, a new bumper, both front and rear, will cost 40 to 50,000. Aluminum hood is a rare part and costs 80 to 90,000 more, although there is a piece steel analog for 30,000. But the front fenders are again strictly original, with a price of 20 to 25,000 rubles and delivery time of a month and a half. Even the windshield will have to be ordered branded at a price of 20,000 rubles. Optics on officially sold in Russia sedans were strictly xenon, and it, as it is easy to guess, also has no analogs, and costs 80 minus 100,000 for a headlight. In general, the purchase of Malibu is a reason to learn to look for and order parts from foreign dealerships and from the USA. By the way, when selecting spare parts, it is worth remembering that the model had European, American, and Chinese versions, although their differences cannot be called massive and cardinal. And one more caveat, the chances of meeting a beaten car are really small, but on the market there are piece variants brought from the USA, and here the probability of accident history increases many times. This, of course, can be checked with Carfax, but the question is whether it's worth it. As we recall, the 8th generation Malibu moved to GM's Epsilon 2 platform, the same one that underpinned, for example, Opel Insignia. And it's very much in the car's favor. The structure here is the same, McPherson in front and multi-lever at the rear, and the kinship with Opel and other co-platformers promises that there will not be those problems that we saw with the body. Repairability, of course, is not ideal. For example, the front ball bearing, as well as an Opel, is changed in assembly with a lever. But the lever itself can be bought not original for $5,000 to $7,000. The rear silent block of L-shaped lever is available separately and costs $3,000 for firm, and from $1,500 for analogs, and the bushing. 4 repressing can be bought from 500 rubles. Shock absorbers here conditionally own, so there are few analogs. Besides the original for $20,000, in fact, there are only KYB for $17,000. Stabilizer struts are also not unified, and the choice is narrow, either original for $3,000 or Magneti Marelli for 800 rubles. Hub bearings both in front and behind are changed together with hub unit, and here unification with Insignia will allow to buy a part. 4,300 to 6,000 instead of 18 to 20. Rear levers are not unified and therefore not very cheap, 5,000 to 10,000 for a detail, but for the lower transverse, for example. There are substitutes, and in general for everything here you can buy silent blocks for repressing. In general, unattended suspension in case with Malibu is a reason to bargain well, but there are no complicated solutions like controlled shock absorbers or air cylinders here, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Brakes Malibu also received corporate brakes. Mechanisms here are the most primitive, single piston discs with a floating bracket around the circle, and there were no frills like Brembo mechanisms, as in Insignia OPC. But the discs themselves are large. Even cars with basic 16-inch wheels had ventilated discs for 296mm in front and unventilated for 292mm in the rear. However, the cars with 17-inch wheels were equipped with ventilated discs, and their diameter was 321mm in front and 315mm in the rear. So there is no need to complain about the performance, and the cost of consumables too. The front disc can be bought for $3,000 to $7,000 instead of $18,000 to $20,000, and the rear ventilated disc will cost even cheaper, $3,000 to $5,000. Attention here should be paid to the condition of highways, and also to the work of parking brake. It is electromechanical, and their executive mechanisms are very expensive, and reassembly will also require money. The steering rack here is with electric power steering, and it is also suitable from Insignia. This is very good news, because the price tag for a new one is not just 6 figures, but in some places it exceeds 200,000. Against this background, a restored rail with an amplifier for 45,000 to 50,000 is just a gift. By the way, light knocks pursue owners with low mileage, so you should not panic at once, but also unconditionally believe the seller. Talking about chronic disease, too. The Malibu had quite a list of transmissions in the world, including even a 6-speed manual, but we only got GM's 6-speed 6T40. And that, it must be said, is not a good option. You can read in detail about all the problems of the gearbox, for example, in the article about Chevrolet Epic, the Chevrolet Epica. If we talk briefly, then this is a high operating temperature, where of the hydraulic block, low operating oil pressure, malfunctions. Of mechanics, including planetary gears, as well as typical wear due to oil contamination with abrasive from the locking of the torque converter. Before buying, you should be concerned about both diagnostics and test drive, and you can't forgive anything here. Taking into account that Malibu is even larger and heavier than Epica, life of a box here is not easier. The only consolation is that the box is well mastered in the services and is not very expensive to repair. The local Malibu also had only one motor. It was a 2.4-litre gasoline unit of the Ecotec family with the Index LE5, which the car inherited from the previous generation. It produces 167 horsepower, which is generally not much for a large car, so it is not surprising that in the world the bet was made on other, more powerful motors. However, another thing is more important for us. This old engine is quite good and reliable. It has cast iron liners in an aluminum block, not bad chain timing and simple distributed injection. Phaser regulators are applied on both inlet and outlet, but their price is quite adequate. The cost of timing maintenance may seem a bit high against the background of other chain motors, but it will not ruin either, taking into account the frequency of replacement. A large disadvantage can be considered only the absence of standard repair sizes of cylinder piston group, but not every owner at breakdown will be puzzled by capital, taking into account that for replacement it is possible to pick up similar Opel motor A24XE, which is familiar, for example, on Antara. In general, you should not expect miracles from the motor, but it will pass its 250,000 on condition of normal service. Thus, the main task when buying a Chevrolet Malibu is to find a car with a live and service transmission and an intact body. And if with a check of accident history can help, for example, Autoteca, the check and diagnosis of the box before purchase in any case falls on the buyer. Well, for a budget of 1,000,000 rubles you can look for a well-groomed car with mileage up to 200,000 kilometers, like this. However, logic suggests that bargaining when buying such a rare and not very liquid car can be active, and with a long search there are chances to find a car with less mileage, and for much less money, for example, for 800,000. And for such a price in these times you can forgive the car a lot, especially if its rear part will really make you turn around every day when you go home. In conclusion, the Chevrolet Malibu presents a compelling option for those considering a purchase in the 1,000,000 ruble range. With its beautiful design and reliable performance, it offers a blend of style and functionality that appeals to many drivers. However, potential buyers should weigh the vehicle's features against their personal needs and preferences, as well as explore alternatives in the market. Ultimately, if you value a striking exterior and a dependable motor, the Malibu could be a worthy investment. Thank you for watching, and we hope this review helps you make an informed decision.